When you expressed a desire to have a talk and some discussion on how to publish, and we were coming to Amsterdam, it seemed a really good idea, a perfect idea to ask Professor Myers to come in and talk to the group. He is, not only has he published widely in lots of international journals, he's been the editor of the International Journal of Public Opinion Research for the past 4 years. It's a journal that a lot of the work that you're doing fits into. So it's great that he's agreed to come in and talk to you about this. He's also members of editorial boards and associate editors. He's the associate editor of the Journal of Marketing Communications and on the editorial board of the Journal of Advertising, the International Journal of Advertising, the Journal of Advertising Research, and the Journal of Current Research Data, Current Issues in Research and Advertising. His areas of research are in media and communication and public information campaigns, of course, and public opinion as well, and political communication, as I said. He was the scientific director of ASCOR, is that right? When I was here, and everything revolves around my period of time. ASCOR. In 2000, between 1998
and 2005.
So he was scientific director. When I was here at ASCOR, currently the Dean of the Graduate School of Communication. What we'll do is he's going to give a presentation. He has said that he will take questions along the way and comments along the way. Claes is here as well to answer questions. He also has a little bit of experience publishing. And he will be taking over as editor of the International Journal of Public Opinion Research when Peter's term ends. So thank you both for coming and agreeing to talk to the students and others who are here. Great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Please allow me a couple of remarks about the institutes in our building. Because, well, I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Communication, and it's also ASCOR, and you might be puzzled by all those institutes. So please allow me. This is Communication Science, this is the front of our building, and that's the back of our building. So if you come with your bike, you have to take this entrance. This is what we do all the time. And we have 3 institutes here. We have the College of Communication, that offers a bachelor program in Communication Science. We have the Graduate School of Communication, and the Amsterdam School of Communication Research. Talking about the Graduate School of Communication, we have 3 or 4 programs. We have a master program in Communication Science. And in the Netherlands, the master program is 1 year only. 1 year only. And, but next to that, we have a research master in Communication Science, and that is a 2-year program for those students who are very motivated and interested in research. And yeah, usually they continue with their PhD. And so that's the second option. And we have a 3rd program, that's the Erasmus Mundus program. That's a program together with Denmark, Germany, England, and Wales. And that's a program in journalism, media, and globalization. And we also contribute as a graduate school to the PhD training program. And so this is the Graduate School of Communication housed in this building. And we have 4 tracks: corporate communication, political communication, persuasive communication, and use of media. If you are interested in these tracks, in these programs, we have a website, Graduate School of Communication, WVA.nl. So it's a very long but simple name. And here you can find all the information about the programs of the Graduate School of Communication. But the most important institute in this building is ASCOR, the Amsterdam School of Communication Research. And usually all the teachers, the professors in the graduate school have also a research appointment. And the research is done in the context of the Amsterdam School of Communication Research. Claes is director of this institute. And as it is said here, ASCOR is the largest institute for communication science research in Europe. And must have been very... Well, maybe it is true or not, but we have at least a big school. Now, 2 slides on my background. I was born and raised on the island Texel. Do you know where Texel is? Well, dark blue is the Netherlands, a very small country. And here we have the country, and Texel is the island. This island. That's the island called Texel. And this was my background when I was young. So it was a big shock for me to come to Amsterdam, which is little. I studied political science here at this university. Communication science didn't exist. I was affiliated with the Free University, came back to the University of Amsterdam, and as was already mentioned, I have 2 hobbies. One is public opinion, and in general media effects, but I also do a lot of studies in the field of advertising, and I'm editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Public Opinion Research. And there's a lot of work, so I'm very happy that that place will take over in August. But it's very interesting work as well. Okay, this was my short introduction. And now I want to discuss the topic of this morning, helpful tips on how to get published in journals. So keep it secret, because if you know it and others don't, that's the best thing to have. But I'm not sure that I'm going to tell you something new. But perhaps for some of you, I don't know your background, so that's not easy for me to, in preparations for this talk. Who has published already in a book or in a journal? Okay, many of you. Please feel free to join in if you have other ideas about the helpful tips. And for others, maybe something is new and relevant. So let's see what we can learn this morning. First, you should consider some things before submitting a paper. What kind of things? Well, in general, think of publishing not only as an intellectual process, but also as a social process. And especially think of publishing as persuasive communication. And you have to sell your article, or your book chapter, or your book to editors, to publishers, and so on. So it is very important that you don't only have a brilliant idea, but that's not so difficult to have a brilliant idea and to do good research, but it's very difficult to get published. And so that's the most important part of our academic life, thinking about strategies to get published in journals or in books. So it is a social process. It is because a lot of article writing is together with other people. That gives problems, advantages and disadvantages, but it's also persuasive communication because you have to sell your product. Now the first question is, why publish? And why should you publish your articles and your ideas? Well, we have very interesting arguments that this you have to contribute to the scientific community. But there are also a couple of strategic arguments, and that is, if you have a position at the university, for example, you have to publish. That is, publish or perish. And another important thing is that if you publish, and you publish in the same topic all the time, and you are the most important person in the whole world for that issue. And so to get issue ownership, that's another important reason to publish. But it also gives you a strategy rule that it is better to stick to one topic or not too many topics, because you have to be like a brand. A brand is also associations example, you have the thing, framing, place-to-place, or Europe, place-to-place. And that's a very simple rule, and that's another important thing for your publication strategy. And you have to publish because you have to keep your job, but keep it simple and keep it, one or two topics, then you have your networks and people in the world know you as the person in that field. Perhaps there are other strategies, but that's at least what I think would be a very good strategy. And it gives you visibility. As I said, well, feel free to give your suggestions and arguments. You want to really have it easily done. Well, it is very seldom that you are the only author for an article. So, publishing is a social process, as I said. But now, the question comes, who should you involve as an author in your article? You can say, well, perhaps all involved in the work of paper writing. This is a very limited approach. We have the philosophy that only people who write or contribute in writing to the article is allowed to be an author. But you can also say, well, all involved in the work necessary for the paper to be written. What about the person who gives you methodological advice, for example, or the person in the laboratory, or people who help you to conduct a survey? And you can involve them in as an author in your article. Or you can involve even all those people who were important in getting funding or grants to make the study possible. So if there is, for example, a full professor who got a grant and you do the job, and you write the article or conduct the study, you want to even include him or her as an author in your article. Has anyone of you ever had problems with authorship of an article or publication? No big fights or... You?
With me now.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you... Obviously there are different traditions. If you were publishing in the sciences, the answer here would be clear about who's included. Also within the social sciences, the answer is clear because it's those who are involved. They only see the intellectual contribution as the writing of the paper.
Yeah.
I'll just speak frankly here. It's difficult, though, when you spend a lot of time producing data, which comes to be a club good, which is then taken by others and then they publish with it. In the social sciences, because they don't, except for a reference, is given for the work of the paper, though the paper could very well have been impossible to write had the data not been available. What do you think? Should we be moving in a particular direction, or are the social sciences, and specifically political communication, are we okay with a strategy where it's the intellectual contribution is seen as, and then authorship as solely the writing of the paper?
And maybe Dave, you can tell a little bit about the policy of ESCOR.
Well, yeah. Maybe just one comment in first. This is delicate. I mean, and this is the kind of thing that if you don't talk about it with the people you work with, and if it becomes an issue, something that you thought was a friendship, all of a sudden over a stupid article can become lifelong, full of enemies. So my first advice would be bring this up early, and if you're a student, just bring it up and ask what your supervisors, because it really, really varies a lot from university to country to sub-discipline. So bring it up, and you are in the wonderful position that you can just bring it up as a question. What is your take on this issue? How does it normally work here? That allows you to hear how it normally works, and then you can think, do I agree with that or not? And then you can see whether or not it makes sense to continue it. But I think that ESCOR has pursued a policy already from the time that Peter was director, where we say, well, working together as a group is important. It's also fun, and typically groups can do more and achieve more than single individuals. That also means that there are people in the group who, for example, go out and get big grants where they might be able to bring on 2 PhD students to a project. They are working on the grant proposal, they have the idea. It doesn't mean that the PhD student is doing exactly what was in the grant proposal, but obviously there's an intellectual investment on the side of the senior researcher to get that grant. The PhD student is typically the one that writes maybe 90% of the paper. So in terms of that first, the old rule of, authorship is writing, that would probably be said, in the old system, that would be a paper written by a PhD student. But the reverse side of that coin is, of course, the whole project would not have been there in the first place had there not been that investment much earlier in the process in terms of having the idea and getting the grant. So the ASCO policy for the past, more than 10 years has been that PhD students on projects are always first author. No way can a senior researcher be a first author on a PhD project. That's important. But then we are, what you could say, generous in terms of who should be on a paper, because someone who has gotten the grant has also made an investment and has also contributed to the ideas in the paper. And sometimes if you go out and you ask someone, can I have your data set to maybe address this issue, there might be an issue. Sometimes people will say, yeah, sure, go ahead, and it's publicly available. Sometimes someone will say, yeah, but I'm interested in the same ideas. Why don't we make a joint paper out of this? So the ASCO philosophy is with PhD project, the PhD is always first, but everybody who is involved, so that would be more like the second and the third one, are typical candidates for authorship too. But we try to have the rule and say, but let's talk about it per paper, because sometimes one of the supervisors is only a supervisor because that person is extremely well versed in multi-level modeling and has not really contributed anything to the paper that used an experiment. Well, then that person is a co-author on the one paper, not on the other paper. But it's very important to bring them up early. I think the move is towards having more and more groups, and then it's important to bring up these things early. Yes?
Your opinion on it's not personal, it's a colleague of mine who are in the group. Like they apply together to a grant, and the group collects several types of data about MPs, about qualitative stuff, survey stuff and stuff. And 3 of them are writing an article now for an international journal that's been accepted, and using only one subset of the data.
Right.
And the others who are responsible for another subset, because they are part of the team, they keep saying, like, you want our names standing out. Do you think it's fair?
Well, I think that if you are in a project that is like this is important to bring it up early, because it's kind of late now that the article is done and accepted, because that's when it gets really ugly. Because then you say, well, of course it would be nice to be added onto an article that I haven't seen before and that's completely ready. But if the group would have said, look, we are as a group now going for this and we agree that everybody gets an everything, I would not prefer that if it's a big problem. That would seem too lenient to me. But if you agree, so here's what we do it. Each of one has a responsibility for a sub-selection of data. These persons are always on when this data is used. If you use two data sources, you consult with the other group who was responsible for that data. That would be my suggestion to something like that. But the problem seems to me now that that's something that should have happened 2 years ago, and not now that there's a finished article. And that's why, if you have these doubts, you are in the best position. It's very uncomfortable to discuss this with supervisors and senior researchers, but you could just ask what they think about it as opposed to immediately getting into a discussion. And, well, I would say that many senior scholars are very understanding also of the situation of a junior scholar and the need, as Peter said, for publishing. So they should also be thinking, well, that makes sense that we do something together here. And that's why, for example, we have the ASCO policy, with PhD projects. Never ever can the senior person be the first author on an article coming out of a PhD dissertation, but very typically is a supervisor, a second, third, fourth, eighth author on an article that comes out of, because we don't have any projects anymore in this institute where there's just a student walking in from the street with a good idea. Here are always projects that you apply to, so there's already been some, say, intellectual investment in advance before the project starts. So I don't know how to advise you on solving this problem now, but my advice would have been,
I'm not part of
no.
this
But my advice would have been talk about this very explicitly very early. And it's better to have these sort of general fights before there's a paper on the table than to have it when you actually have this concrete case.
There are internal decisions and policies about publishing, and in some ways those reflect external constraints and external incentives as well. So if you're publishing from the perspective of you have to publish or to be promoted and etc., your institution or externally through assessment exercises, there's a particular preference or recognition of particular authorship order as well as number of authors. So if you're in the UK, it's still very much the tradition and the expectation that you, in the social sciences, and particularly in political science, that you have sole authored articles and sole authored books. That's an external pressure, and that's both from the perspective of being promoted in your institution, because you have to go out for external review, and so you're working in a community of scholars that expect sole authorship, but also in the assessment where we have an assessment exercise. Sole authorship is rewarded more than co-authorship. And so if those of you, because you're all working in a tradition of quantitative, empirical, political science research, where data collection and grant and research funding is very intensive and labor intensive, and you need a lot of resources to do that, it doesn't seem reasonable that sole authorship is the way forward. It just doesn't make sense for the reasons that Peter and Claes have been talking about. So there's a real, in the UK, and I'm not sure if this is the case in other countries, there's a sort of a disconnect between these, how we work as scientists and what is rewarded in our academic community. So sort of the academic community has to catch up with where we are and the direction that we're going in. But I think it's there's still a lot of tension there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure if we'll get to that, but so far we've talked about whose name appears in the paper. What about the order? I mean,
that's the next one.
Maybe we can discuss that. One general remark: it is better to collaborate with people who have tenure, because they are less eager to be on front or for all the people. It's better to work with. Who's the first author? Well, here are some possibilities. A person who wrote the paper, the one who did most of the work for the study, the person that masterminded the paper, or the most senior of the researchers. And I think, again, we should discuss this up front before starting the research or the study. It's not, maybe that's even more difficult because you don't know before you start writing a paper who is going to do most of the job, of course. But you can discuss it. And I think most problems in ESCOR and in our institute came from unclear situations. So, but as a junior, it's not so easy to discuss these issues with senior people. But well, you should do it. It's the only way to solve this potential problem. What about the order? Do you have any preferences here?
Well, I was just thinking, you could possibly do it alphabetically or something, but I mean,
and George is
I'm sure there must be some sort of traditions.
Yeah.
For different doing.
Yeah, for PhD projects, as Claes explained, the PhD person, the PhD is always the first one. But we can also have an alphabetical order, of course. That's on here we have first order masterminds and writes a paper, second order contributes analysis, writes smaller parts, and third order edits, comments, and advises. This is more or less a tradition you can stick to. And the first order, well, that's the intellectual behind the whole project, and the second order contributes a little bit, and the third order is there because he or she is part of the team. But you can also have all authors equally share the work, and you can have an alphabetical order. Sometimes there is even a star in journal articles so that each author contributed equally to this piece and took emphasis Or if you have a team and you write many papers, then you can change the order, alternate dispersed authorship in different papers. So as I said, it is a social process, a lot of negotiating, but still it is fun to conduct research and to publish articles, but there are some things you have to keep in mind to prevent problems.
Can I?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm wondering, where is the line between supervision and co-authorship? For example, I've been working on a paper and I've been working with my supervisor at my home university. Now I spent 3 months in Florence working on a paper. Now I get some feedback here. I will probably exchange some more emails with the discussant. So there's like a lot of people, I mean, trying to help me work on a paper. So, yeah, I'm wondering what to do with that.
Well, I think if you get good comments from someone at a conference, that's where you typically see in the sort of the thank you section. You know, you thank your reviewers and you thank, you know, a respondent at a conference and someone you might talk to. If someone saw one version of the paper and gave you some 2 good ideas and a number of minor comments, that doesn't warrant an authorship. But your supervision and the one that might have a thought of the project, that if you are in a tradition where that is the way it works, that would seem logical. And then this is one of those issues, if you then go to somewhere else for 3 months and work with that person, I would check. I would first check with your supervisor, you know, what do you think? Should I talk to this person about that? And then if say, yeah, go ahead and talk about it. Then you can address it with this. You say, look, we've worked on that. Would you be interested in being on board on the paper? And that's how I would approach that.
Yeah, how good is it to have like a big name on the paper? For example, Mark Frank is a very good example. I think it could be very beneficial for you to just have his name.
I would always publish with Mark. Yeah.
So can I because I mean, me as a second year PhD student, go ask him, because I don't feel like I have that I'm.
Well, you should say, look, I really appreciate it. We talked about this paper a lot and you get really good feedback. I would like to invite you to be part of the paper. Is that something you would like to do? That's a very open question. Then he can say, frankly, no, I don't have the time if he doesn't want to. Or he can say, I think that's a wonderful idea. But you always run a risk if you don't know people well, because let me just rewrite a few things and then you get a totally different paperback. But if you think that would be beneficial and you think it's kind of fair because you've talked a lot about it, I would simply ask. And some people will say, you know, no, that's okay, you know, I just gave you some advice. Or I said, look, yeah, I'm really interested in that topic and actually I have 3 more ideas, so why not? But I would then, if I were you, I would first check with my supervisor at home what he or she thinks about it. And then, depending on that, go with an open question. And then formulate the question in such a way that it doesn't seem as if, you know, the person has to say either yes or no to a question.
Problem solved. Yeah, another important thing is that you have to think about a strategy, about a publication plan. So you are not writing just one paper, but hopefully a series of papers. And then you have to think of what is the plan behind my publication strategy. Do you aim at quantity or quality? For example, we have the rule that we have to publish here in Amsterdam 2 journal articles each year. But for example, in Harvard, one of our colleague institutes, they have the requirement that you have to publish 1 article a year. But it should be a very high quality paper in a high quality journal. And so, yeah, we aim for quality here in Amsterdam, but at least 2 publications. But in Harvard, they say, well, we prefer 1 high quality paper above 2 quality papers. And so that's a different strategy. And I don't know what is the best strategy, but you have to think about it. It takes more time to publish in a high quality journal. You get the article back all the time. You have to make revisions 2 or 3 times. So it takes more time and you are not able to publish the same number of articles in a high quality journal than in a quality journal. So do you aim at a low or high quality journal? What about the timing? And what about the topic sequence? And this is also important, focus. Well, you have to think about it. In ESCO, for example, there is the policy that each PhD student in the first months of his or her project has to come up with a publication plan. Think about it. So in your first months of your 3 or 4 years PhD project. Is it the same in your institute, or is it a good idea to do that?
As long as you can change But is that time, because the public, or the way that you write a dissertation or PhD thesis is to have a series of articles.
Yeah. Okay.
So is that what drives that desire to have a publication plan early on?
Yeah.
And it may be.
It can be altered. The idea is that because I mean, when you just graduate, you have no clue, what important journals are and how publishing works. And by making that plan after 2 months, it makes you sit down and think, okay, well, I do this kind of work. That means that political communication, International Journal of Public Opinion Research, POQ, and this journal, those are the 4 real important journals in my subfield. And that already gets you so thinking about these kind of things, as opposed to, now I only sit down and think about my research. This is not instead of thinking about, but it's alongside thinking about the research, that you already identify and you think, oh, okay, so I should also, keep a special eye to new publications in these journals. And before I submit to one of these journals, I want to double check what they have done on my topic in the last 5 years, because, it would be pretty lame to send a paper to political communication on a topic that they've just done 2 pieces on, and you don't cite those 2 pieces. That would, because chances are high that these 2 pieces, the authors of these 2 pieces that have just come out, will be reviewing your piece. So these are the kind of things you need to start thinking about earlier. Then you can, once the paper is done and it ends up being totally different than you had anticipated, you send it to a different journal, of course, but at least you have a plan starting thinking about, oh yeah, and you might also say, well, I think I have 3 papers out of this project. One of them is more a political science behavior type of journal. This one is actually much more a media or communication type of journal article. These kind of considerations.
My question is, there's a abundance of special issues lately. Most of the journals invite on a special topic, so how would that influence the whole plan? Because sometimes it's really nice to be lucky to have a special issue where you actually have a higher chance.
Yeah.
It's always trending. So would it be a strategy to actually look for these special issues? Is it the same for as a normal, regular publication in the same journal, or?
You mean, does it count? Is it given the same weight in terms of quality? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, I think
it's hard.
Because there is the assumption that it was sort of slightly easier to get into the special issue rather than the normal review.
Because the impact factor is the same.
Yeah, of course.
It's different when there is an editor sending you an email that, look, I know you're working on this, so if you would like to contribute and looking for papers on this topic.
But after 5 or 10 years, and you have your publications, nobody knows anymore.
And it's only if you had 3 publications and they're all special issue publications, that would probably look weird.
Yeah.
But if you have a balance, it wouldn't be an issue, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Feel free. No,
It's like because it's all free advice here, so it's going to be about worth what you're paying for it. But I like to say that we think of this quantity-quality thing as a trade-off. If you are publishing a lot, that can't be high quality. But that is absolutely not the case. I think 2 articles from ASCOR could be as high quality as 1 from Harvard. So I don't think you want to think about that there is necessarily a trade-off. But what I think about as you're doing your PhD work, my advice would be to get into the best journal that you can initially, simply because that really places you well in the job market. And that don't feel under pressure to publish a lot at this point. But do make sure that you aim high for your work. One of the professors at Exeter, talking to a group of PhD students, said, this is, and it was really depressing for me to hear this, but he says this is the best work that you will ever do, is at this early stage of your career. It'll be the most creative, it'll be the most innovative, and oh man, it's depressing. I thought I had some good years to come. But no, you guys have, you guys are looking forward to some of your best intellectual contributions at this point. You're all doing, well, one thing, you have the time. One thing, you're working on cutting edge stuff. And you're working with good supervisors to be the potential to be innovative, and that's the stuff that will get published in the really good journals. So my recommendation, I don't know if you disagree, is to focus on aiming high at this point.
Yeah.
With that, with the chapter from your thesis that you think is the best, really try. And you have the time. You don't have to worry about getting promoted at this stage. So you can spend some time trying to get it into a really top journal and discuss that with your supervisor. What do you think the best journal is for this? And they will name 5 or 6 journals that they think you should be in, and try for this.
I agree with Susan. As long as, because that's the typical PhD danger, is that because you aim high, you think I can always improve it a little bit, and that means that you actually sit on the manuscript for another year, and when you look back what you did in that final year to the manuscript, you think, gee, why didn't I just do that in 2 months and send it out? Because you're going to be sitting waiting 6 months for the reviews to come back in, and when you aim high, you fall deep, and that's rough if it's your first submission and you've sent it to a good journal where the acceptance rate is maybe 6 to 8%. And you get 4 reviewers, bashing your first article. That's not nice. We do a course here in ASCOR where we actually have some of the most publishing people come and they bring reviews of their pieces that they're getting out as senior scholars, and we give it to the PhD students who, it doesn't change. In fact, I think they're getting more and more hostile to me. It happens to everybody, also to Mark Franklin. And it's important to develop some kind of self-protection mechanism. When you send it to the top journals, it is hard to get in. The standards are very high, and people are candid in their reviews. So it's not going to be nice if people say that your question is uninteresting, that it's theoretically underdeveloped, and that your data analysis are simplistic and wrong. That's not nice to hear, but that is what happens. But so I agree with Susan. Go for the aim high for the journals, but don't let that translate into taking another year to finish up that article that was almost done, because it will take a year before it may be accepted, and another year before it's published.
Okay, thank you very much. And what else is important? Maybe this is also important. Focus. And there's even an expression for it. It's called least publishable unit. And what is that? Well, the idea behind is that you conduct a study and you collect a lot of data, and you are inclined to put everything which came out of the analysis in one paper. But that's not a good strategy. And you have to think of the idea that maybe one data collection can bring you a couple of articles, can produce more than one article. More and more it becomes a policy that a journal article